First, thank you again for coming on such a, I'm going to go ahead and be honest, a miserable cold day. But something I've grown to appreciate working here the short amount of time I've been here, and adding all the time before that when I used to come visit at least 2 or 3 times a year, I'm really getting a feel and a sense for how great this garden is in terms of season of interest. There's always something here, winter, spring, summer, fall, and being here through 3 of those seasons now, it just seems to get better and better. We are, I think, underestimated in that regard from a garden perspective. There's a lot of stuff to see here any time of the year. So what I've tried to do with this talk, this is a question we get asked a lot about, are what are some good evergreen plants for the shade? There's a lot of usual suspects, and I tried to steer away from those as much as I could. There's a few of them, but I've tried to pick things that are mostly attainable, things that have caught my eye, things that have texture or interest, and hopefully I'll succeed in that as we walk around today. So I'll try to remember to repeat questions. Let me know if you can't hear me and we can get the little beatbox out, but our first plant is right behind Elizabeth. So the first one I wanted to talk about is Aspidistra, and I have kind of a love-hate relationship with Aspidistra. There aren't a lot of them I like because they always get those burnt tips, it seems like, and other ones are just kind of green, and they definitely serve a purpose. It's a great dry shade plant, but this one I really like because it stays pretty clean. The tips aren't all brown and chewed up, at least not yet, and I love the spotted nature of the leaves. This one is Aspidistra, oblanceifolia, Nagoya Stars, and I love, it gets that name from these little spots that kind of look like stars at night. David Parks at Camellia Forest told me a long time ago, I asked him, what's the theory behind those spots? And what he told me that he heard is this kind of mimics insect injury, so it makes the plant less susceptible to being eaten. I don't know if that's remotely true or not, but I like that. It's stuck in my head forever, but I think that's a good analogy of why it looks like that. It's hard to beat Aspidistra for this kind of a situation, this little dry, probably less than desirable soil in this little strip here, but it works hard all season long with that evergreen interest. And this one I particularly like with that spotting. It really kind of stands out in more of a darker landscape. It can take a little more sun. It can take a little bit more shade. This is kind of a happy medium right here, but I really, really like this one. And we've got this planted kind of throughout the Arboretum. Any questions about this one? Number 2 is right behind me. I'm making this a little bit easy. We don't talk enough about vines, and there are a lot of good ones that are out there, and if it is evergreen, all the better, because it's going to work really hard in the landscape. This is Schisandra incarnata. This is magnolia vine, native to Asia and China. It gets red fruit on it. This one, according to Tim, will get a little bit burnt in the wintertime. Right now, as we just kind of ease into cold weather, it's gone through 2 25-degree nights, kind of unscathed. But I like vines that kind of serve that purpose and don't lose all their leaves throughout the growing season. So again, taking advantage of kind of a sterile spot in the landscape, filling up this with this nice green texture. Easy to take care of. You can prune it if you need to. Needs a little bit of support to grow onto something. It's not going to be one of those suckering vines that sticks to your house, but with a little bit of a structure, it'll twine itself around and kind of support itself. This one's probably due for a little bit of a haircut. We cleaned up the top earlier in the summer to get it off the building. We cleaned the windows recently, but we'd like to do, and Mark and I agree on this wholeheartedly, do more with vines kind of throughout the garden. Any questions before we move on? All right, let's keep moving. Stay warm. So it is Mahonia season in the garden. They've started to come to life, and I didn't want to turn this into a Mahonia love fest because they're all starting to kind of wake up right now. But this one, we've got this planted in a couple places in the garden, and it really lights up this very shady part of the garden this time of the year. I also walk up and down this path a couple times a day, so it always kind of greets me in the morning. This is a Southern Living introduction. It's Mahonia Marvel, and it's more of an upright growing one. The folks that developed this says it gets 6 to 8 feet tall and about 6 feet wide. We've got one close to the Japanese garden that's probably 12, 15 feet tall. So plants don't always read those rules. They kind of do their own thing. Very easy to keep this Mahonia in scale. It can tolerate a little bit of pruning. This is something that is one of those few plants that remains resistant to deer. This one I have been warned, it's not going to produce as many flowers if it's in dense shade, so it needs a little bit of kind of filtered light. It's pretty dense in here, but with the leaves off, it's kind of opened up. But through the growing season, it's pretty dark in here with all this deciduous over cover. But one of the things I like about Mahonias is they flower at a time of the year when there's not a lot flowering. So they're a good plant for pollinators. When it's a little bit warmer, it's absolutely covered in honeybees that live on the property and other solitary bees and other pollinators. So it's a good plant that kind of fits that niche to kind of carry your insects through the growing season. And I really, really like this one. It's Mahonia Marvel. Any questions? The question was, how about invasiveness in Mahonias getting into the woods? This is, I think, an ex-media. Those have had kind of mixed results with that. This one in particular, I don't think produces seedlings. I may be wrong. This isn't one of the ones that gets nasty and gets away. There are some that do. Those are the ones that we kind of steer you away from. I know that Tom Rainey at Mountain Horticulture, NC State, has done breeding work on some for different colors, different sizes. And that was one of the things that he looked at, was ones that are sterile and they don't produce seedlings. The question was some of the ferns that we have in the garden. Why are they so hard to find? Ferns are very hard to propagate. Tony Avent has gotten that down to a science. It takes a lot of time to get those from spores. If you want to see some of that in progress, come down to our building. Sophia's got grow lights in her office full of little containers with fern spores in it. It takes a lot of time to get those to of size. Also, from a nursery production standpoint, getting those of size to sell so they all look kind of nice. That's the main reason. And it's also something that not everybody, unfortunately, are as in tune with diversity and interesting different plants. Everybody wants the same things that their neighbors have or what they see in the Chick-fil-A drive-through. That's not something that's very common. And part of that is how hard they are to propagate and just enough people to actually do that and grow and sell them. That's a very wide, educated guess. Yeah. Anybody else? All right, we're going to go right to that Aucuba. Again, being brutally honest and bearing my soul to everybody, I have not been a fan of Aucuba. And if it weren't for my relationship with our director, Mark, who is probably the most rabid fan of this particular group of plants over anybody that I know, you can't help but absorb some of that being in his orbit. So I've chosen to take a more stingy route in my love of Aucuba, and I've only got a handful of ones that I like. I'm not a big fan of some of the yellow ones. Michael Durr told me one time it was like a leprechaun threw up on the plant because it had too many colors, too many greens and yellows. And I like that analogy. I like some of the just straight green ones. I like ones with bigger textures. I like ones that have nice form. And this is one that kind of fits into that realm. This is Aucuba japonica Pacman. And hence the name. It stays kind of nice and round, which is good. And I like its use here because, again, it's in that soil strata where it's competing directly with all those roots of a tree, not getting a whole lot of irrigation, and it's perfectly fine and happy here. This is a plant that used to be on the do not eat list by deer. I think this is now on their list of things that they will eat, unfortunately, but it's hard to beat this broadleaf evergreen in terms of the work that it does in the garden versus the amount of work you have to get to keep it alive and doing its thing. Pretty trouble-free, not terribly hard to propagate. I don't know if this is one of Tony's or not. It may very well be, but I like this nice tight one here. It's one of my favorites. Any questions about this Aucuba? All right, we're going to go that way. I'm also bound by law to talk about conifers working here at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. I've got a lot of very good friends who have grown a lot of conifers. I came from a very conifer-centric garden, and it was by assimilation that I gained that love for them. I particularly like ones that do well in shade, and this one does okay in those kinds of conditions. This is Thujopsis dolabrata Aurea, and in more light, you're going to get more Aurea. In more shade, it's going to stay more green. So this one is a little more green. This time of the year with the deciduous cover off, you can pick out that yellow coloring a little bit more. Through the growing season, it's pretty green. And that's okay to me because this is one of those plants that I love the texture of this all through the growing season, and particularly now when you've lost that kind of deciduous layer. It has a very fern-like look to it. I like the more wider than tall aspect of it. You can kind of keep it in this kind of configuration if you want to. Very slow growing, but I love the big scales and the fern-like foliage of this plant. The underside has those, and I'm going to forget the botanical term for that. Do you know it?
It fell out as soon as you looked.
I know. As soon as I looked at you, I saw it disappear.
The stomatal bands?
That's it.
There
the
it is.
Stomatal bands. This particular plant is known for that, and I like that interest as well. You know, and it's all testament to, you know, touching your plants in your garden to look at some of those details, especially in the winter when there aren't as many things going on. But a great one for some shade. Does better with a little bit more light. There's a couple of different cultivars, but I really like this because of the texture. Yes?
Could you put this in an open forest area with deer?
I had this in my garden in Charlotte, and we had deer pressure, and I don't remember them eating this. I think that's because there are so many other things that they could feed on. The thing about deer that people need to understand is they're going to try anything when it gets to that point. When they've decimated everything in their natural landscape, they're going to try stuff, and they may not like it, but they might nibble on it. I can't say for certain whether or not this is. I wouldn't call this deer proof, but I've not seen them eat this particular plant. So just heard that they have not touched this in somebody's garden that's very heavy with deer pressure. I've not seen that. I've seen this in other gardens too, where they had deer pressure. I visited a landscape in Asheville this summer, and they had a nice specimen of this there, and it was not touched. Other things were close by. But I hate to say something's deer proof. As soon as you say that, they're going to start eating it. Any other questions before we keep moving, keep the blood flowing? Okay. This is tissue weather. I need to remember to carry tissues with me. So if I wipe my nose on my sleeve, please forgive me. I mentioned wanting to do kind of more unusual, not standard garden evergreens for shade, but I snuck this one in because this is an old favorite. This is Sarcococca hookeriana. This is a cultivar called Western Hills, also called sweet box. It's not a boxwood. Kind of has that texture. I think it's a good substitute for boxwoods. But the thing I like about this plant is the nice evergreen texture, the nice kind of mounding habit that it has, and you can see the flower buds that are starting to form and starting to peak a little bit of color. That cold snap we had a couple days ago shut it down really quickly, which I'm glad, but this will be covered with white flowers that are really fragrant into the winter time. Again, when there's usually not something in flower, and I love that about this plant. It's kind of sneaky. The flowers aren't super showy. You'll catch the fragrance way before you see the flowers, and I like that about this plant. It's a little bit inconspicuous, but a good foundation plant. There's a couple different species, lots of different cultivars, does well in shade, and not 100% sure on the deer proofness of this. I've not seen them eat it in other gardens I worked at, but it doesn't mean that they won't. Any questions about this one? Yes. Not a lot of irrigation here. Again, you've got a lot of mature plants in here that are putting a big root system in the ground, and this usually does well in this kind of situation. We also have this in our winter garden in a very similar situation where there's lots of mature trees and it's tucked under things. It can take a little bit of dry soil. It can take that tough love. Any other questions? I'm gonna go that way. up until it got super cold, we had a lot of camellias kind of going full guns. And this particular one has been flowering, good Lord, for several weeks now, it seems like. I want to say when we started setting up Moonlight, it was opening up flowers. So it's been going for quite a while. I'm going to butcher the name of this, so please forgive me if I do. This is Camellia vernalis Ginryu, and this is a hybrid between Schisandras and japonicas. So it kind of strikes that note kind of in between. The flower is big, and the foliage is nice and soft. The buds start out pink. You can kind of see them here. So you kind of get multiple colors, and the petals on the outside are kind of pinkish, but it fades all to white, and it holds up pretty well. It's just turned a little bit of brown from the cold snaps we had this weekend, but I love that it's been blooming for so long. Camellias are a staple in a shady garden. They do really well. They can take that balance between filtered light and dense light. I think they flower better with a little bit more filtered light, but I wanted to show at least a couple today because it is a really good evergreen for the shade. And this hybrid, the vernalis, are becoming my fast favorites because they bloom really early and seem to bloom for quite a long time. Any questions about this before we move on? Y'all are too easy. All right, over to the Japanese garden. So we're at the entrance to the Japanese garden, and this is a plant that I've had an affection for a long time. I've done a lot of work with boxwoods, and we've got a really good collection of boxwoods here. This is a plant that you can grow from coast to coast. It's pretty adaptable to any type of situation. There's a bazillion different types of cultivars, different species. There are some diseases that are starting to affect them because it is such a staple in most people's landscapes. I like to show and highlight ones that can handle urban conditions a little bit better. And again, things that look good this time of the year from a texture standpoint. This is Buxus seneca, variety insularis. This is an Asian boxwood, and this is an unnamed one that's just a low spreader. This isn't a typical form of just the straight species, but this thing has just continued to mound over itself since we planted it here, and I like this as kind of a welcome into the Japanese garden. I love the form of it. I like the shape. I like how it kind of fills in this landscape. Pretty decent in drier soils. Doesn't get a lot of irrigation here or love. It gets a lot of organic matter because we kind of changed the mulch out, and I think that helps it from a plant healthcare standpoint. A lot of people tend to overwater boxwoods, and that causes a whole chain effects of problems. We do a lot of tough love here at the garden, and I think that has helped these to be healthy and happy. And we'll kind of end the walk today through the boxwood collection and look at a couple more. But a good plant for the shade. Also, the deer do not like it as of today at 1:38 p.m. on a Tuesday. Any questions about this one? Yes. Does it get the boxwood blight like the traditional boxwoods? The Asian ones aren't as susceptible as the English. That doesn't mean they don't get other boxwood diseases or insects. This has a little bit of boxwood psyllid on it, which is an insect. So they fall into that realm of succumbing to some of those things. I think the trick to avoiding a lot of those issues is cultural, not overwatering, not planting too deep. I've visited 1 million properties when I in my previous job looking at boxwoods and landscapes. And when they're over pruned, you can spread the disease from the pruning equipment. You don't need to do anything to this. Plant it and kind of walk away from it. So having good cultural practices is the key to keeping them healthy. Planting at the right depth, good soil, not overwatering, those simple things I think help out a lot. And this species in particular is a good one and has done well in our part of the country. I think we were a part of a boxwood trial years ago, and I was at the same time frame in Charlotte, and these all performed well. All right, let's zip into the garden. This bird follows us through the garden. It landed on Lynn's head the other day. I told Blake when I was prepping for this the other day, I had in my mindset evergreen ground covers because we did a midweek for that, I think. Yeah. So I got halfway through and I was like, hold on a minute, this is evergreen plants. So I kept a couple of those evergreen ground covers in, mostly because they fit the niche. And secondly, this is a plant that I have a very strong affection for. This is Ophiopogon japonicus Goyoko Ryu. There isn't an Ophiopogon out there that I don't like. And I love this one because of its very tight, short nature. I would love to have a lawn of this and never have to worry about mowing it. I don't think it could handle the traffic that turfgrass handles, but it sure does look pretty. I would be one of those old men that kept people off the grass if I had this in my front yard. But I love how nice and tight it is, how it fits in around the root flare of this crepe myrtle. It's a really, really good Ophiopogon. There's more behind us there. We've got it through the lath house, but it really fits in well in the landscape as a nice evergreen ground cover. Moist, well-drained soil, doesn't need a lot of care. We try to keep the leaves off of it as much as we can. Every morning we'll come in and we'll blow to keep the leaves off. And I think our friend here is about done dropping leaves, but a pretty carefree evergreen ground cover. Any questions about it? Do I have any experience in growing it from seed? I'm gonna continue my streak of honesty and frankness. I don't have patience to grow things from seed. And I know we have a whole crew here that does that, and God bless all those people for their patience and perseverance. It's an easy way to grow a lot of plants. I don't know how fast this grows. It's really easy to grow from divisions. Just take a piece. I remember in a previous job, I was working at the Biltmore estate, and a nurseryman from Georgia came up and got a bunch of this. He was going to propagate Liriope and Ophiopogon, and I didn't know how he was going to do it. He had a pickup truck and a tarp, and he just dug up big hunks, threw it in the back of his pickup truck, and covered it up and drove back to Georgia, and then just divided all those up and put them in little pots. That's the fastest way to do that. The seed are really hard to find, but it's at the very base of the plant, kind of a silvery bluish black. Any other questions? All right, we're going to go that way to that Aucuba. So again, disclaimers. I've fulfilled my obligations. I've put 2 Aucuba into my tour. I'm all emotional about it. I'll leave the deep dives to Mark, but this is one of the yellow forms that I do like. It's very consistent, the spotting and the coloration. This is Aucuba japonica, Mr. Wonderful. This is also a dwarf. It stays kind of small and mounded. It fits in really nicely here with its neighbors. This is the same guy that I talked about earlier, same cultivar. Same Ophiopogon over here. So a good companion plant that works well in the shade with other evergreen plants as well. But I really, really like this form because it's very consistent. A lot of them are, the splotching is not, I like things neat and tidy in my life is what I'm trying to say. And this Aucuba stays neat and tidy. One of my favorites. Any questions about this before we move on? All right, into the lath house. So we're in the lath house now, and there's a lot of stuff in here that fits that evergreen shade-tolerant niche. And I wanted to pick something that is always kind of striking and we get a lot of questions about. This is Daphneophyllum tasmanii mountain dove. Daphneophyllum are kind of a niche plant. They typically get kind of big, usually just green, and produce a fruit that kind of hangs down, but a good broadleaf evergreen for the landscape. This one has this incredibly bright, variegated foliage, and I said that right, foliage? Foliage, yes. Not the easiest to propagate. Our good friend Pat McCracken, I think, has figured that out and is growing this at his place. I would love to have one of these in my garden, and I'm overdue to visit him, and this is high on my list of things to get, but I love how bright this is from brightening up the landscape and being an evergreen. That's a hard task to follow with a plant. If you look a little bit closer, the petioles of the leaves have kind of a nice pink tinge to them, and that continues throughout the growing season. A little bit of spotting on the ends of the leaves. I think maybe when we did the lath house reconstruction and all the protection was off, it may have gotten a little bit of burnt by the direct light that it wasn't used to, but a pretty tough plant. Can't speak to its deer hardiness, moist, well-drained soil, which it gets here. Everything in here is irrigated, so it gets a little more love than most things in the garden, but something to keep your eye on. The plant card every once in a while will have some of those out there. Any questions before we move on? The deer don't touch the regular one, somebody testified to, and I've had that one in several gardens and have never seen them bother it. I like the green one. It's a really interesting plant. I've heard people call it the poor man's heat-tolerant rhododendron. Because the redneck one, I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to go there. I was being politically correct and kind, but it does kind of resemble that, and it's hard to grow rhododendrons in our clay soils. It's a tough plant. We get asked about this one and the regular one all the time. We've got several nurseries that are trying to grow it from seed, actually. It's a very interesting plant.
It doesn't show up on the giveaway or the plant sales.
On the plant sales, once in a while you'll see it, but not the giveaway. Any other questions? Let's keep on trucking. We're gonna go this way. This is a plant that I first saw at a nursery in Japan, and it was in full flower. This is Aurea japonica, Ginryu Hisaaki. I don't know if there's a common name for it. There's a couple different cultivars. This is one of those plant collectors, kind of unusual plants, but it really does well in kind of neglected shade for whatever reason. You can see here it's planted between this hardscape, the wall, and all this reflected heat in the summertime, and it's absolutely thriving here. The flowers are very inconspicuous, early spring. One of the descriptions I read called it malodorous. To me, it smells kind of like rotten meat. It is malodorous. It's not something you want in a wedding bouquet or a boutonniere. I think it smells that way because maybe it's pollinated by flies. That could be my only guess. But it's one of those things that only a plant collector would be interested in and want to grow more. We have a couple of other cultivars. Tony had this at one point, but just an unusual plant that fits that evergreen niche. Not something you're going to find anywhere. It's something that we'll put in plant auctions on occasion and things like that. So we have propagated it with some success. Tony has, Pat has, some other people. There's a couple of other ones that are a little bit more smaller in size and don't smell as bad. But if you're going to grow this, get a smelly one. I think that's something that's kind of unique to have in the garden. Any questions before we move on? Sorry to gross you all out. It happens here on occasion. All right, we're going to go that way. I wanted to show at least one more camellia, and I like to give props to our friends, neighbors, and allies. This is an introduction from David Parks at Camellia Forest. This is Camellia yoyamachi, and I apologize for butchering the name. That's the best that I can do. This is I think it's a Schisandra. This one's been blooming for a long time as well. It's a good welcome to, you'll never guess what garden this is, the White Garden. It's kind of a good welcome to that. I don't know if Doug snuck this in, but this to me kind of looks like something he would do. It's got a little bit of pink in it, so that's him bucking the rules, I think. That's a total Doug move. And I like that about him. I love that about Doug. But it stays mostly white. When it first comes out, that pink is more pronounced, but it's a nice welcome into the White Garden. So it's been tucked back here as you first come in. This one's in a little bit more light, and I think it produces more flowers because of that. But we have a really good collection of camellias, and they're blooming at all different times of the year. So again, hearkening back to my introduction, there's always something to see here, winter, spring, summer, fall. And you can't go wrong with camellias in your landscape. This is a really good one. This next one is a remnant of evergreen ground covers, but it's a plant that I've liked ever since I learned about it in college. This is not English ivy. This is Horticulture, Algerian ivy. This has all the attributes that you want in a ground cover, but none of the bad things that English ivy has in it. It's not invasive. It doesn't spread. I like this bigger texture better than the smaller form. It's one of those kind of plant it and forget about it plants, and forms a nice ground cover. It's not going to shoot up your trees and take the trees over. Slower growing than English ivy, but I love this great big bold texture that it produces, and it really stands out at this time of the year in a winter landscape. So it definitely scratches that box for me of evergreen plants that look good in a shady condition. All right, we're gonna go out that way. We're almost near the end. This is a plant that I like a lot also because, again, it scratches that winter, spring, summer, fall niche, and it's an evergreen that does okay in the shade. This is Danier racemosa, poet's laurel. I meant to look up where that common name came from. Oh, I'm seeing from the peanut gallery that it helps with people that are bald. They used to make laurels out of it. The Greeks made laurels out of it. Okay, that makes perfect sense. It does kind of have that laurel effect, and it would serve itself well. If I'd have been smart, I would have made one of these, and I could have put it on my head when we got here. I need to remember that for next time. The other thing I like about this plant, I love the texture of the leaf. If you look at it up close, and you can see the fruit that it has kind of all over it. I have no idea if that's something that the birds eat or not, but it just gives it another color at this time of the year. I've seen this used in Christmas decorations, and we've got this in several spots kind of all throughout the garden. It's in the winter garden. It was up at the front entrance, but this kind of fit well on my exit back to where we started from. Any questions before we keep going? Very deer resistant. That's good to know. It doesn't like the sun. Yeah, it is definitely a shade plant. It gets a lot of light here through most of the, it's covered up with the deciduous, but through the winter, it's kind of in the open. I just love that Prunus mume starting to flower. Okay. So we're almost near the end, and I've shown a couple of boxwoods, and I like to take these through parts of the garden that I don't think get enough love. And this has always been a favorite spot of mine because it's kind of a little garden room. This is our boxwood collection, and it really kind of defines the spot very nicely by closing it off. But I don't think a lot of people that come here even know that it's here, so I like to walk through these spots. Again, boxwoods are good Unitarian plants. They come in a multitude of shapes, sizes, flavors, and colors, and we've got all those exhibited here. We're kind of in a state of flux about what to do about this because obviously it's grown together and we've lost some of that definition, and it's kind of been there, done that. But it still kind of holds a spot in my heart because it's a true Arboretum collection, and I like that about this area. One of the things I like about this is we've got a couple that are kind of unique, and the one that I want to talk about is Buxus harlandii. I love, again, I'm all about texture this time of the year as we ease into the winter time, but I like the great big leaf of this and how it's kind of borne upright on this plant, and you can really see the difference as it's kind of mixed in amongst its family members here. This is Barter Valley, which has been around for a long time, a really good boxwood for landscapes, and you can see the difference in the textures and foliage. This is that Buxus siniqua that we saw earlier, the Chinese or Korean boxwood, and this particular one that has the most unique foliage is also the same as this one, but I would say it's a little bit different. A colleague of mine at Longwood Gardens saw this, and he's like, we need to propagate this and get this out there because it's pretty unique. And I always forget about it. And when I was walking through the tour, I was like, I don't think we've gone any further with that conversation. But I love the size of the foliage on this. But just wanted to come in here and show you the multitude of different, they're not all the same. And there's a lot that we don't have that are out in the trade now that are more disease resistant. They're working on ones that are more resistant to all the diseases that they get. It's a good plant. It can be overused in some places, but I think it has its purpose in the landscape. Any questions before we move on? Got one more to go. Okay. Ending on a high note and right on cue, it's starting to drizzle a little bit. That's a cool umbrella. Sorry, I got distracted. This is Viburnum tinus Lisa rosa. I love this viburnum because it's evergreen. It keeps this nice texture, this nice solid green evergreen nature all through the growing season. But the late winter, it starts to produce flower buds, and they're just now starting to open with those couple warm days that we had, and they're very fragrant. This one is named because as before those buds open up, that's that nice kind of rose color, and the flowers are a little bit flush pink before they open all the way, but you can just see the amount of flowers that this guy has on it. It's going to do better in a little bit more light. It can take a lot of shade, but to get flowers, you're going to want more of a filtered light. But I love in terms of different species of things that work well from an evergreen shade-loving perspective. It's nice to have a viburnum in the mix with all the things that are out there. But there's lots of different cultivars of this particular species. There's dwarf ones. There's ones that get a little bit bigger than this. All of them work very well in the landscape as far as I'm concerned, and bloom at a time of the year when there's not much going on. So a nice one to kind of end the tour on. Any questions about it before I let you go get warm and dry? Well, thanks for sticking with me. That was fast and furious. I appreciate y'all coming out in the less than desirable weather. Thank you.
I appreciate that you didn't cancel today.
Well, rain or shine.
Thank you.